I left more talent in my toilet this morning than Green Day has ever had. Green Day sucks. I'm glad that you're thinking about us while you're taking dumps. We're doing something right.
We'll think about you while we're sucking.
It's the 60-second album review with Daniel Galioto, Green Day Spectacular. Here's your host, Sweet Jimmy Cook.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of American Idiot and the 30th anniversary of Dookie, which by extension means the argument if they're punk or not is 30 years old. But that's not what this is about. Green Day's first 7 records are really great, and I think they warranted a 60-second album review for each. So without further ado, I give it to Daniel.
In 1989 and 90, Green Day released their first album plus 3 EPs, and while 39 Smooth pales in comparison to the band's later work, Billie Joe Armstrong already had an amazing songwriting ability with an ear for hooks, chord structure, and melody, and the whole band had a keen sense of arrangement. Billie's lyrics are almost entirely about unrequited teenage love, and not only is that okay, it's endearing. From the beginning of the first song, when he describes seeing a girl in the library, he brings you into his little world and keeps you there for the next half hour as he sings of the objects of his affection, always winding up with other guys or just wanting to be his friend. Ditto for the 1000 Hours EP that preceded the album and the excellent Slappy EP that came after, both of which were later appended to the CD of 39 Smooth. The following Sweet Children EP is the weakest of the bunch, and that ended up tacked on to the next album. It's not a masterwork, and in retrospect, John Kiffmeyer was a serviceable drummer that didn't fill the role quite nearly as well as his successor, but songs like the excellent Going to Pasalacqua set the stage for great things to come. With an improvement in songwriting and the addition of a new drummer, the incredible powerhouse and consummate goofball Tré Cool, none of the songs on 1991's Kerplunk would have been out of place if they ended up on Green Day's next album, you know the one. And in fact, one of them actually did that, Welcome to Paradise. If you've only ever heard the albums released since 1994, go dig this gem up immediately. From the opening blast of 2,000 Light Years Away to the closing up-tempo acoustic number Words I Might Have Ate, the album never sags, except maybe with Android, which feels a little samey and unnecessary, but the strongest tracks like One for the Razorbacks, 80, and the excellent Christie Road are proto-Dookie in all their punk but accessible glory. Tré Cool really makes his presence known with his machine gun fills, tight as hell timekeeping, nuance like the thoroughly effective retard in Christie Road, and the utter wackiness of his lyrics and vocal on Dominated Love Slave. With a little more studio polish, this album could have easily stood tall with its breakthrough successor, but it's damn close. Dookie! With Kurt Cobain taking himself and Nirvana out of the picture, the timing was perfect for Green Day's new old brand of punk rock. The first single, Longview, opened the door, Basket Case busted it wide open, and then When I Come Around burned the whole barn to the ground. From the opening snare cracks of Chump to the bitter sneer of the penultimate track, In the End, these songs are so full of energy and hooks that any of them could have been a single. Raucous enough to be punk, tuneful enough to be pop. And while these songs tread the same ground as Kerplunk, with lyrics of unrequited love and toxic relationships set to fresh melodies over fast-paced but familiar chord progressions, producer Rob Cavallo beefs up the guitars, gives the drums some extra oomph, and makes sure the bass cuts right through. The final track is a perfect Fooled You kiss-off tune that keeps the punk rock cred intact, followed by a ditty by Tré Cool for a bit of comic relief hidden at the end. 90s CDs. 30 years later, Dookie remains a classic that has aged well for almost all ages, a near-perfect blast of everything great about the 90s. After the huge success of Dookie, Green Day got dark on Insomniac. The music still sounds like Green Day, but gone are the unrequited love lyrics and kiss-offs for the girls who wronged them, and in their place, a lot of angst, mostly pointed inward. Billie Joe's lyrics explore the less than glamorous side of drug use in Geek Stink Breath and Brain Stew, both of which remarkably were singles. He is clearly not alright, and says so in the song Stuck With Me. Later, there's even a track called Panic Song, and this album has got wall-to-wall F-bombs. Elsewhere, he's a brat waiting for his parents to kick the bucket, a walking contradiction, a guy with no pride. This album, which zooms by in just over a half hour, sounds like a cry for help. Even the humor of using an obscure Saturday Night Live quote as a song title gets undercut by the song's self-deprecation. But there is a fantastic hidden gem called Stewart and the Avenue, which comes closest to the Green Day of the previous albums. The only problem is the sequencing, with two of the weakest tracks in the penultimate position just before the big closer. But other than that, this is a grim but satisfying record. Uh-oh.
Ladies and
Thank you very much.
The Sweet Jimmy Network. Yep, we're still here.
Green Day goes longer on Nimrod, and as they finally seem to be settling into their place as rock stars, the angst turns to anger, with most songs directing their ire toward the second-person you rather than the first-person I of Insomniac. And Billy Joe sure has a bone to pick with you, with songs like Nice Guys Finish Last, The Grouch, Platypus, Reject, Take Back, and Prosthetic Head. Oh, and that sweet song you love, Time of Your Life, that's actually called Good Riddance. But Nimrod has 18 songs, so there is room for introspection too. He's Off the Wagon and Hitchin' a Ride, and Lost for Words and Redundant, a great video by Michelle Gondry, by the way, Breaking Promises and All the Time, and downright apologetic in Walking Alone. Despite the familiar trademark musical hooks and melodies, all this bogs the album down a little bit, so the relief of the gentle surf instrumental Last Ride In, and the fantastic New Orleans-style horns and the hilarious cross-dressing anthem King for a Day are most welcome. Nimrod isn't a bad album, but it is a bit much. If any Green Day album should be called 21st Century Breakdown, it's Warning. At the dawn of the new century, the band was at a crossroads. Only 6 years after helping bring punk rock into the mainstream, the entire musical landscape changed around them. With boy bands and girly teeny bopper crap dominating, where do Green Day fit in now? The Misfits turned mainstream, turned Misfits again. The first single was a firebomb of a jig declaring they wanted to be the minority, and it suited them fine. Elsewhere, Blood, Sex, and Booze thematically harkens back to Dominated Love Slave from Kerplunk, but is an awesome fast shuffle that rocks hard. Church on Sunday bargains a hot night out for a repentant morning to an effective 1-4-5 chord progression that also has a stiff little fingers-esque breakdown. Waiting has some fantastic drumming, and Misery gets into some weird polka territory that somehow works. And Macy's Day Parade I find to be one of their saddest songs ever. The album isn't entirely consistent, and it sounds like a Green Day that's struggling to find its place, but it's definitely worth a listen to hear them do so. 20 years later, American Idiot still holds up. The lyrics are poignant, the music amps up the Green Day formula to its biggest, most bombastic extreme. It's got not one but two 9-minute multi-part epics. Is this prog punk? Maybe, and it's also stadium punk. Some of these songs are downright anthems, like Are We the Waiting, which sounds like it was a sing-along made for tens of thousands of voices. But the songs are also thoughtful, tuneful, and heartfelt. Try not to still get affected when you hear Wake Me Up When September Ends. There's a story here, and I don't know what it is, and I can't really follow it, but there are characters and exposition and conflict and climax, and something is happening that's getting me emotionally invested. It's not exactly a rock opera like The Who, but they did give it the Tommy treatment and brought it to the musical theater stage. Haven't seen it. But this album out-Who's The Who. Hell, it out Green Day's Green Day. It was and still is their peak. And I can nitpick that sections of Jesus of Suburbia sound like Motley Crue and The Alarm, but what's the point? American Idiot is a perfect album.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Check out Dan's other reviews right here on the Sweet Jimmy Network. And while you're at it, check out This Month in Punk Rock History, the show Cheetah Chrome called Wannabe Tabloid Bullshit.